Hey folks, how you guys doing? Hope you're all having a great day today. Like many of you out there, I have a hard time throwing away scrap wood, small little parts here and there, especially if it's a nice hardwood, because, well, you could use it for something, right? And my excuse has always been, I could use that for a pen. I could put that on the lathe and turn a pen with it, right? Pen blanks. Yeah, I've been using that excuse for years and barely turn any pens anymore. So one way to use up some of this scrap wood and try out a new technique was to make some drawer pulls on the pantorouter. And I thought the process was a little bit interesting, so that's what I'm going to show you today. So this is a one solid piece drawer pull. You have an integral tenon on this side, so a dowel, and then whatever decorative shape you want on this side. And in this case, I just used a dovetail bit to create, well, something that looks like this. If you just drill a hole into a drawer front or whatever, slide it all the way through, and that's the look you're going to get. But you can use a lot of different router bits, OG bits, maybe like a tongue and groove bit to create almost like a nail head. Yeah, I guess a nail head would be the best way to say it. So your limit is, you're only limited by the router bits that you have. The process is really simple, and that's what I'm going to show you today. This is just a chunk of 2x4 that I very crudely drilled a bunch of 1/4-inch holes in and 1/2-inch hole because I like to have this little block sitting on top of this table as I'm working, the pantorouter table as I'm working, just for quick access so I don't have to keep opening the drawer back and forth. But as you can see, I made a bunch of these 1/4-inch drawer pulls already. And we're going to use 3 different router bits for this. This is a 1/2-inch spiral upcut router bit. All of these are Astra coated by Bits and Bits. So this darker section, this is an Astra coating, and it reduces friction, reduces heat buildup, prolongs the life of the bit. This is a 1/2-inch spiral upcut. We'll use this. We'll also use a 1/4-inch spiral upcut. And for this particular shape that I've already shown you, we're using this 8-degree dovetail bit. This is the type of scrap wood that I'm talking about. Small boards like this. I took these and ripped them down to about 1 inch by 1 inch on the bandsaw. As you can see, there's already a tenon on one of them from just playing around. But this type of scrap will allow a lot of pieces to be made at once. Simply make a dowel on either end, take it over to the table saw on the crosscut sled, cut these off, and then create 2 more dowels on either end, take them to the table saw, cut them off, so we can batch out a bunch of these very fast. What makes this process so fast and so repeatable is the use of these templates. Now this template is perfectly centered, well, I say perfectly centered, as centered as I could get it, left and right on the template holder. Now there is holes in here that with the rest of the templates, you can line up the center of the template into one of these 1, 2, or 3 centered holes. But obviously we need a screw here to hold the template to the template holder. So instead of using this to center the template, there's a little notch cut, which is difficult to show up on camera, but there's a little notch on the top center of the template, and you line that up with the line that's been scratched on the center of the template holder. With the guide bearing in the center of the template, the mortise or the hole will be cut with this dowel template. And with the guide bearing riding around the perimeter, the tenon or the dowel will be cut. We're making the dowels first, so we'll start with the 1/2-inch spiral upcut router bit. It's worth noting that you need to cut the mortise before the tenon, and the reason being is the mortise is just whatever size the router bit is, so it's going to be a fixed size, and then the tenon can be dialed into the fit that you want. So in this case, I took a piece of something really hard, so it's not going to deform at all from various different attempts to size something. So I've got a 1/4-inch hole and a 3/8 of an inch hole. Both of these were cut with the router bits that I'll be using. I may or may not use the 3/8, but I went ahead and made one simply because it's easy to do it while I'm already set up to do that. And now that I have a hole to gauge the dowel, I can dial in the size of the dowel as I'm cutting it. With a piece clamped to the table where I want it, I can slide the carriage forward so that the router bit touches the material and then set my backstop. Now from here on out, I know with the router stopped, the exact location of the material. I can just slide it forward until it touches the router bit. So that's the backstop. Now how far forward do we want to go? Well, I'm just going to shoot for about a 1-inch long dowel, and that should accommodate all of the situations where I would use a drawer pull, 1 inch in length. It'll give me a little bit extra that I can trim off for, say, like a 3/4 inch material, and it'll also give me a little bit sticking out if I ever want to wedge these dowels in place for drawer pulls. So now I know that my dowel is going to be this distance, which according to the scale is exactly 1 inch. Now the only thing left to do is dial in the exact, well, you kind of can't see it, the exact position of the guide bearing on this template. I'll go ahead and dial in the position of this guide bearing for the tenon or for the dowel without dust collection so you can see what's going on, so you can see the process. And then I'm going to put dust collection on because I don't want to suffer. But basically, we're going to start with this guide bearing close to the template holder and then move it further away, which will reduce the thickness or reduce the size of the dowel. And we'll periodically test it after every cut up against this little guide block here. You'll notice that I'm going counterclockwise around this template, and that's so that we're making a climb cut all the way around the piece here, and that'll give a more accurate size when it's all said and done. You're not going to have the bit deflect into the material, which I don't think will happen with the 1/2 inch bit, but a 1/4 inch bit it can. So with our 1/4 inch hole, nope, it's too big, it will not fit in the hole. So now we can take our template, our guide bearing here, and pull it a little bit away from the template holder, and therefore seeing a smaller diameter that we're going to trace. The perimeter of this template is on an angle, sloped a little bit. All right, that's a good fit. It's actually a little bit loose. I went too far. But the way I see this, well, maybe that's too loose. I was going to say that the PVA glue will expand the wood a little bit as it's being seated home, or as the dowel is being seated, but I think that's just a little bit too much. So let me go ahead and mark on this one to cut this one off and not use this one. But I'll go ahead and flip this piece around so I get a fresh block to start with. And here's where that backstop comes into play. So with the bit not running, I can slide this up against the bit, clamp this down, bring this back up here, and we're going to climb just a little bit up the template. Oops. And we'll try again. All right, I'm going to call that dialed in. So with that being set, I can go ahead and put the dust collection on, so I won't spray myself with all this, and get all of these knocked out real fast. So the 8 boards that we had earlier, 2 per board, one on either side, that's 16 minus the original one that I put pencil on to tell me I need to throw that one away. But now I can separate all of these at the crosscut sled on the table saw and repeat the process until I don't have any more usable material left, just to see how many I can get. I don't need this many. I actually don't need any. I'm just kind of experimenting right now and having fun. All right, just that fast, I got distracted. The earth spun around one more time. It is a new day. I got this many cut. All of these in this pile are about 1.25 inches long, I think, something like that. Just rough cut with the table saw, and these are all 7/8 of an inch long. So the next step is to cut a setup block or a clamping block on the pantorouter so I can clamp the dowel in a repeatable position every single time, and then face off all of these shorter ones to a length of about 3/4 of an inch for these, And I don't know on these yet. I'm gonna have to figure out a length for these, maybe 1 1/8. Anyway, I just need consistency with all of these to make sure that they are all perfectly the exact same length. And also this face over here, the front face of the pole, needs to be the exact same distance from the start of the dowel over here. So these clamps are great. I really like them. They're easy to use. The only downside of these is sometimes you can shift the material one way or the other as you're clamping these down, because the rotational direction here will sometimes shift the pad. So I want this to be as foolproof as possible. I want this setup to be just to not move one bit whatsoever. So I do have the fence as a reference face, but I'm going to take that a step further and put one of these front stops on the table, and I'm going to put one on this side of the fence, so it just acts as another locking point to stop the fence from moving. So I'm not going to be shifting that way any. This is going to be a consistent size every single time. Let me go ahead and make a mark on this side to go up against the fence, and then I can use this other, let's see if I can put my pencil in my pocket, this other front stop over here on top of the table right here, maybe. Oh, it's going to be in the way of the clamp. Let's go right here. And now this should eliminate any type of twist or shifting of the stop block this way. I'll use one clamp over here to pin it in place, and then this clamp will be a toggle to clamp down on the dowel every single time. But before I can do that, I need to drill a hole in here with the router bit. The clamp in back immobilizes this block. The hole drilled in the front is to allow for repeat alignment of all of the knobs, and the slot cut at the bandsaw allows for compression of the block on top of the dowel. So it's like a little toggle clamp. So I'm going to go ahead and face off all these short ones at 3/4 of an inch in length. Alright, so I ended up with 3 different lengths, and it'll just give me some wiggle room to experiment with. So for the first one, these shorter ones, that's what I'm going to use to make these small little dovetails. Now there is something to note about these, and I don't know if it's going to show up. Yeah, I think you can see it. See the shoulder of the dovetail is pronounced there. You can see the shadow line right there. And if I spin it around, that shadow line somewhat disappears. There's still I can still feel a tiny ridge, so it's not completely off center. Well, it is off center, but it's not catastrophic, I guess you could say. So there's a little bit of a shoulder all the way around. So the thing is, something shifted here, whether it's this or whether I'm clamping and twisting this a little bit, or something's moving, so I'm not getting 100% perfect, consistent results. So there's a couple things I can do. Number one, I can climb the guide bearing a little bit higher on the template, so it produces a slightly larger dovetail, which is fine, no big deal. I can do that. But one of the things that's just the easiest way to make this consistent, because at the end of the day, you're not going to notice a 64th or a 32nd of an inch right there, however much that is. You're not going to notice that being off on the drawer a little bit. But you do want consistency if you're lining up multiples together. So the way I'm going to gain consistency is, if I put this in a drawer, I'm going to want to have all of the grain either horizontal or vertical. All the grain's going to have to match up, right? So if that's the case, then I can make sure that all of these are mounted in such a way that the grain is the same orientation before I cut. And then whatever error or whatever offset that I have in my setup here that I don't really need to track down, whatever error that is, it'll be consistent and it won't ever be seen or noticed, because it's all going to be, well, it's going to be in the drawer. all of the poles cut. And I tried a few different router bits. Now I didn't record any of the various different router bits, just the dovetail bit, because, well, it's the exact same process, and I'm more or less kind of experimenting, trying to figure out what I do like, what I don't like, streamline the process, what can I learn from it. And there's a few things that I did learn from it. Not all creativity turns out to be, well, nice in the long run. But anyway, let me bring you in closer and I'll check out all the results. All right, what do I like? What do I don't like? What would I do again? Well, this is all an experiment, so it was fun to just chop stuff up and not really have a game plan in mind or an end goal in mind. The smaller dovetail poles I really like for something like a jewelry box or something. You know, that's going to be a great size for small boxes and whatnot, even if it's like a little finial on the top of a box, right? So that's going to be a nice little pole to keep on hand. So this was, let me put this back in here. This was created with this particular dovetail bit, right? Small dovetail bit, small dovetail pole. I wanted to have something a little bit larger, something I can see on a dresser, chest of drawers. So for that, I made this one, which is, as you can see, much larger, and it was cut with this larger dovetail bit. And this is sized appropriately, I think, for like a dresser, chest of drawers, something where you're going to be pulling a little bit larger of a drawer open, so you want a little bit larger of a pull. I like this. I wanted to expand upon this even further by cutting some type of profile on this outer edge right here. And I've got this, like this recessed roundover bit that you can plunge into the surface and get kind of like a compound roundover. I was going to mess around with it, but I ultimately decided not to because I've got quite a few of these that I really like and might use on an upcoming project. Didn't want to screw them up because I was having some issues with getting everything mounted concentrically or in the same exact location, so I didn't want this to be not quite perfectly centered. So maybe I'll experiment with that at a later date. So I like these. Also, when I was cutting these smaller dovetails, I took too big of a bite and broke one, which prompted me to first, instead of going right to the profile bit, to first use a 2-flute spiral to reduce the amount of cutting surface area for the profile. So just a roughing cut. And I thought, well, that's not bad actually. Just, again, very basic, very simple. So I cut a bunch of these to have on hand too. Just a very modern button, right? I like that. So while I was already set up, I did the exact same thing in a much longer version. So I got some of different lengths, which are nice. And then I just started to experiment, and that's where it all went downhill as far as the way that the stuff looks. So I've got some of the longer pieces of those double dowels, whatever you want to call them, and I thought, let's see if I can't make some small grooves with a tongue and groove bit set, right? So first off, way too deep on these. This is way too deep. I was trying to experiment with my different guide bushing sizes, and I didn't really have one that was working, so I made a quick little block that I could rotate around the template, and the cut was just too aggressive. That just doesn't look good. So I backed it off quite a bit, made another little template, guide bearing for the template, and this is the result there. A little bit better, but I think spacing can be improved. Not great, but whatever. Maybe half of this, right? So maybe the pole starts right here instead of way back here, and it's just a little button from there. I think that would look good. I also took one of the regular poles like this, the cylinders, and I used a chamfer bit to cut a little groove in it. And then also slightly chamfer this outside edge, and I think that looks all right. I think that looks neat. But I think that's it. I stuck with making a lot of these cylinders and a lot of these larger dovetails. I've got a bunch of these on hand. But anyway, I thought the process was interesting. As I said, even with having all these stops in place, I was getting some shifting here, and that might be due to just the way that this is clamped down. Maybe the slot is a little bit too far down into the hole. Maybe it needs to be a little bit higher, so you have more surface area on the bottom side of the hole to locate the pull before it's clamped down. I don't know, but I think this was the weakest link of this entire setup, even with these stops on either side of the fence and the material. I think a better solution would be something that is similar to a bench hook or similar to a shooting board. Something that has a piece of plywood with a cleat down here that pushes and references up against this edge before it's clamped down multiple times. And I think the better clamps, instead of using these included clamps of the panel router, I think the better solution would be to clamp it down in such a way that it's very similar to these. You have a screw that goes down into a slot down in here, or a T-nut down in here, something that has perfectly vertical clamping pressure, and this is not being skewed one way or another, potentially by this. So area for improvement mainly is this. And then also, if we're referencing off of the side of the table every single time, then you can locate the stop in place, or the block in place, and get it clamped down, put a bit into the pantorouter and center it in that hole to center the template up there. And you can have a lot of repeatability and a lot of precision long term with various different setups, or various different times you're breaking down the setup and then installing it once again to batch out some more of these. That's it for this video. I thought the process was interesting, so I wanted to share it with all of you. It's a great way to get a really customizable drawer pull, not only based upon the profile router bit that you're using, but also the species of wood that you're using. So if you need a really good color match with the project that you're actually making, you can use offcuts from that project to create, well, seamless drawer pulls that match. So it's a really cool concept that you can expand upon in many, many different ways. Speaking of expanding upon, this original design of the pantorouter is from Mathiston, and he's got a set of plans that you can purchase to create your own out of wood. I'll have a link in the description down below where you can check those out. But if you're not interested in making your own tools and you simply just want to purchase them and use them to create awesome projects, well, Max Sheldon over at pantorouter.com, they've expanded upon the plans to create this this full-blown pantorouter machine out of metal. So you've got a lot of options for the machine if you're interested in one of those. I'll have links in the description below to both of those options. And one final thing is a shout out to Bits and Bits company. I'm doing a little bit of advertising work for Bits and Bits. It's a small USA owned, USA ran business that creates their own router bits. That also is a distributor of Whiteside router bits, and they coat all of their bits in an Astra coating, which reduces friction, reduces heat buildup, and under normal conditions will greatly increase the length of the lifespan of the router bit. They're also a new Festool dealer, so if you're interested in Festool products, doesn't matter where you purchase them from, Festool sets their prices everywhere, so it's going to be the same price no matter where you purchase. If you'd like to support a small USA-owned business, then consider purchasing through bitsandbits.com. The link is in the description below for that, as well as a coupon code. I feel like I'm just blabbing on about stuff, so you guys take care, have a great day. Oh, one last thing. If you'd like to stay up to date with all my stuff, go to my website, jayscustomcreations.com/newsletter, and sign up for my email newsletter so you don't miss anything that I publish. You guys take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you in the next video.